Okay, a very good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed lunch, but more importantly, you are enjoying or going to enjoy my presentation. Otherwise, there are so many people sitting there. Okay, it's virtual world in clouds because I'm wearing the meta glasses. Otherwise, there are some humans as well. I said people. Okay, all right. This presentation is going to be a little, let's say, technical with the numbers. The idea is that we need to know and we need to understand what is happening out there in the world. Now, interestingly enough, if we look at our exhibition outside and the companies and the technologies and the solutions and the pathways, it is inconceivable to think that we have about 700 million people that are still hungry. It is inconceivable to think that 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet because we are talking about the ultra premium and all of these things. But these are unfortunately the realities as of now. So this is a sober announcement that what is the situation. It is our flagship report, the State of Food Security and Nutrition, a flagship report by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. We do one global report and then we do the regional reports as well in order to dig a bit deeper into the regional realities. So this is for the Arab region. In fact, it has not been published yet, so we can call it a soft launch. It's primarily the numbers, a lot of numbers in the report, you can see that, but I will share some of the key numbers. But before going into that, we always say that we have to understand that whenever we talk about the food, let us think in a systems perspective. So we all have to understand what are the elements of the food systems in general, because we at FAO think in a systems process. We call it agri-food systems, but you can call it, food systems because, of course, there is a difference in the scope. Now, I would not go into the details of the food system because I think you all know more or less what are the drivers, what are, some of the food supply chain elements, that is part of the system, and the production and the other environment, the ecosystem for the food systems. But what we want to have is an agri-food system or a food system that is much more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. These are the four parameters where everyone, including FAO, is trying to work around. Now, we think about the food systems, we have high ambition, but let's now go to the situation in the Arab region. Where are we now? By the way, the numbers in this report, we always have a number of the previous year because these have to be validated official numbers. So for this year's report, 2025, the numbers quoted are 24, and then in 26, it will be the numbers for 25. Now, unfortunately, the Arab region, if you look at this graph on the right side, green is the global average. That is, going a bit down, but the Arab region is going high. So the prevalence of undernourishment, which is one of the measures for the hunger, it was about 15.8%, which is higher than, of course, the previous year. But in simple terms, about 77.5 million undernourished people in 2024 in our region. That's a huge number. That's only for the Arab region. And of course, in the low-income countries, 1 in 3 people was categorized as, hungry person. So this is a huge number and unfortunately not going better. Just to remind you that the SDG 2 calls for zero hunger by 2030. We are just a few years away. Let's see what do we do in those few years as a magic solution. Now, more importantly, let's dig a little deeper into that. In 2024, which is the reference data year, the moderate or severe food insecurity in the Arab region was about 40%. So almost half of the people were facing one way or the other moderate or severe food insecurity. And in absolute terms, it's about 198 million people. And the low-income countries faced particularly very high because almost 2/3 of people faced moderate or severe food insecurity. Even for the severe food insecurity, the number is about 77 million or more than that. And that is, of course, due to some of the prolonged crises and conflicts in our countries as well. So this is, of course, there are many factors. There's climate change, there is changing consumption patterns, but more importantly, the conflicts in our region. I'll bore you with some of the other numbers, and then we'll go to one of the messages that I want to give out of this report. If you look at the prevalence of overweight amongst the children, so this is particularly I chose as indicator. I mean, there are many indicators, which is 6.9% or almost 7%, and much higher than the global average. And I don't need to say why is that so, because you have to go for the food outlets and the shops. But more importantly, the obesity amongst the adults, one in third person is obese in our region, as per the latest numbers. Of course, I'm this one in third as well. This is also a worrying thing, because if you look at the cost of this thing on the public health exchequers, and for very long period, and the loss of productivity, that is very serious concern. It's not just a number, there is something beyond the numbers. Now let's go to the cost of healthy diets. We all say that we should have healthy diets, correct? Yes, we should have healthy diets. But can we afford that? I mean, now look at this number. It is 4.26 US dollars on the purchasing power parity PPP basis per day per person in our region. Now, how many people in our region, look at the Arab region in a broader perspective. If someone has a household of, let's say, 6 people and only one earning hand, how much, do you need per day just to afford a healthy diet? In some situations, even the monthly salary of, a household would not suffice for one day's healthy diet. But most importantly, since 2019, since we started this COVID and other crises, and that is a serious concern in our region, the cost of healthy diets has risen by 36.5%. And this is another concern. Do you think that the real incomes would have risen by 36%? No, absolutely not. They have actually, in real terms, quite a lot has gone down, but even in, how do we say this, income disparity and the opportunities and, so on and so forth have gone down as well. Now, that means in 2024, the reference here, 186 million people could not afford a healthy diet based on, and this is just based on the aggregate income numbers. I believe that in realistic terms, it will be much higher as a number. So these are the concerns that we have to, the numbers that we have to show some concern. Now, in our report, of course, there is a huge array of the numbers and the graphs. So you can see that once it is launched in a couple of weeks, as I said, officially we would launch. But I want to focus on one specific topic, financing, because that we are discussing in this gathering in the Global Food Talks as well. So because in our reports we focus a bit on the numbers, but the other part is on some of the substantive topics. Now, the interesting fact, and please link that with the previous numbers. Look at this number, and of course, the reason it is 2021 is that that is the latest authentic data that we could get. And in some situations, you'll see that it is even 2016, because we cannot quote a data unless it has been authenticated or validated by the member states. Now, the broad agriculture sector, which means agriculture, food, forestry, and fisheries in the Arab region, received about $28.4 billion financing. It's a huge financing, isn't it? It includes the government spendings, or let's say the government expenditure as a big item, the bank credit, of course, the loans and other things, and oftentimes it is a concessional credit for the agriculture. And there is some FDI as well. By the way, this figure has to be updated. We know that it is a very high, not very high, but let's say higher figure, but unless we have a very authentic, validated data, we will not update that. But now, FDI is a little, let's say, higher in the Gulf countries, but not across the Arab region in general. Now, with this type of, sizable financing, in the agriculture, why do we have still the numbers that are really alarming? Why the hunger is increasing? Although the production in absolute terms is increasing, for sure, with the deployment of the technology and these type of things, that means it is not the availability of the food, it is the access to food that is a serious problem. It is not the production, of course, production still needs to be enhanced, productivity needs to be enhanced, but the distribution, that is a problem. Of course, there are examples like UAE and the Gulf countries where it is much easier and you cannot see that on the street, but let's go to some of the other Arab regional countries where this is a very serious issue in order to have access and, more importantly, access to healthy diet. Now, there are, let's say, multiple risks why people do not invest in the region. As I said, one side of the equation is this Gulf, ag tech, and all of these venture capitals, capitalists who have been here. But otherwise, if you look at the climate change impacts, the natural disasters, the conflicts, prolonged conflicts in particular, and then the revenue streams which are infrequent. You have regulatory systems in many of the countries that may not be perceived to be enabling environments. It leaves the investors a little bit shy of investing over there. There are some structural issues as well that investors either want to go very high or very high or very big in terms of size of investments, and they don't find the feasible options. On the other side, the smallholder farmers would need small financing and investment type of things which may not be feasible for the bigger investors. So we need some intermediary type of vehicles, financing vehicles, blending of the concessional capital and investments and so on and so forth. So we need some innovation in financing, which we have proposed, by the way, in the previous year's report, and I would welcome you to look at that. And we are now trying to work out with some of the financing institutions such as the Arab Authority for Agriculture, Investment and Development, Asian Infrastructure Bank, the Islamic Bank, and many others, so that we can come up with these vehicles which are available and accessible to everyone. Some of the innovative modalities that are there more or less but needs to be really upscaled and deployed for the agriculture or the food system sector in our region, to have the capital guarantees, because that, as I said, for the investors or financiers, this is the most important risk that we have to de-risk or provide them an assurance. Climate financing, or let's say financing to mitigate and manage the climate change, is quite an important thing. And then there are certain situations of the results-based financing, the social impact bonds. We even saw the debt swaps, ESQA, the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, worked with Jordan very recently to develop an instrument for debt swap, not for agriculture, but I think that could be used for agriculture as well. So what are some of the way forward or options? Of course, we know that we need additional funding or additional financing. And as a matter of fact, in different discussions, we often hear that there is a lot of financing that is available, which is true, by the way. Let's say in UAE, the banks are sitting with loads of cash that are apparently or technically speaking allocated to agriculture. That might be true at least in few of the other countries as well, where the banks do have the cash, but they don't have the propositions or the investment options, or even the farmers may not even know how to access that finance. Cost of this finance, that means the interest rates might be an issue in many of the countries, because microfinance in agriculture happens to be one of the most expensive financing instruments in most of the cases. So what we need is that we need to have the investments, larger investments, including from sovereign funds and the development funds. We have to innovate this area and develop some of the innovative financing models, but most importantly, to develop an enabling regulatory and policy framework. And by enabling, it does not mean that it has to be enabling on the papers, because most of the policies, most of the governments, they always work sincerely, and they do have these policies, but sometimes those policies are just on the paper. So enabling means, is it really working in the market? Is this financial market or investment market conducive enough for new investments or financing in the agriculture sector? That is the most important that one has to see, and then facilitate the local and international investors in that. In terms of to build the so-called financing streams, the models that I said, innovative financing models, one of the ideal thing is that we have to mix, the private and public financing streams and internal and external financing streams. We have to come up with so-called consortium or collaborative approach where everyone is sort of de-risking or supporting the other one. And that is the thing which oftentimes is absent due to one reason or the other. You either have a plethora of, let's say, bureaucratic processes for the foreign investors, or you have, the internal investors or domestic who are shy of investing into this area where risk is very high, return could be, low in some of the things. And that is why last year when we launched the State of Food Security report, some of the partners came up with a Cairo Declaration on financing the agri-food systems transformation. And that declaration was essentially a pathway that how do we, along with the partners, let's say in case of FAO, develop these type of instruments and to launch these collaborative platforms or the mechanisms. And that is why we launched last year the Transformational Impact Partnership, TIP. As I said, we are working with these institutions in order to come up with the financing vehicles or investment vehicles where we have essentially three pillars: the equity pillar, the concessional finance pillar, and the assurance or insurance pillar. And all of three pillars complement each other, sort of de-risk and synergize the impact. So next year, our report, which will focus more on, let's say, the thematic topic, will be on the supply chain resilience, because that is really an important aspect that a lot of countries are facing problems in the supply chain due to one reason or the other. So we would like to identify these vulnerabilities, the risks, and what could be the resilience strategy in order to make these supply chains more, let's say, practical and working. I know that we are over time, but that basically ends. I don't know if there is any margin for the questions, answers, or any of the quick comments, but I'm in your hands. Okay, I don't know if there is any burning question or comment or correction. Otherwise, we have to respect the time. No? Okay, good. I know that it's post-lunch. We should give you the medals that at least you are sitting and you're looking like you are not sleeping. So that already deserves an achievement award. No, these are always difficult sessions, after lunch, but thank you so much for your audience. And for details, you can go to FAO website. Please, have a look at the summary report. I mean, we have the summary versions as well of these reports, and you'll find quite a lot of analytical work that will be useful for you, even if you're a business or private sector. Thank you so much.